Less than an hour from now, President Trump expected to meet with his national security team inside of the White House. That as we learn of new warnings from U.S. sources to Fox of an imminent Iranian strike on a U.S. base in Qatar. In fact, it was the very same base that President Trump spoke at during his trip to the Middle East. Now, this is where the United States has its largest airbase in the Middle East, and Qatar has closed its airspace until further notice. You can look at the flight radar. There are literally no flights above Qatar right now. And the State Department is instructing all Americans to shelter in place. We are learning more about America's historic strike against Iran in the meantime. And new details are emerging about this weekend, how the U.S. carried out a highly precise airstrike mission that successfully took out 3 of Iran's most important nuclear sites. You've heard them by name: Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. And now President Trump is calling for peace.
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
The president hailing the mission on Truth Social, writing, quote, "Monumental damage was done to all nuclear sites in Iran, as shown by satellite images. Obliteration is an accurate term." And the Pentagon revealing just how unprecedented the mission actually was.
The scope and scale of what occurred last night would take the breath away of almost any American if you had an opportunity to watch it in real time.
This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown. This operation underscores the unmatched capabilities and global reach of the United States military.
This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany here with my co-host Emily Campagno and Harris Faulkner. Also joining us, Tudor Dixon, former GOP gubernatorial candidate and host of the Tudor Dixon podcast, and Brian Kilmeade, Fox and Friends co-host, host of the Brian Kilmeade radio show, and host of One Nation with Brian Kilmeade. Well, first, let's go to Chief National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, who joins us live from the Pentagon. Jennifer.
Kayleigh, significant intelligence warnings focused on Qatar right now, where the U.S. has its largest air base in the Middle East. Concerns that Iran will fire short or medium-range cruise and ballistic missiles or swarming drones at the U.S. base at Al Udeid. Satellite images show that the U.S. moved most of their unhangared aircraft out of Al Udeid last week, but still this could be a tempting target for Iranian retaliation. Embassies across Doha, the capital, have ordered their workers and their employees evacuated, and for those who remain to shelter in place, the threat appears to be imminent. From a technical standpoint, the military part of this operation on Saturday went flawlessly. 7 B-2 bombers took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and traveled east, while another 2 traveled west over the Pacific, serving as a decoy. The B-2s can be seen on takeoff and landing, but were so stealth the Iranian air defenses never saw them. 125 U.S. warplanes were involved in the strike, including F-22 and F-35 escorts, 75 precision-guided weapons fired by the U.S. at Iran's 3 nuclear sites.
The 4th and 5th generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
The B-2s took off from Missouri at 12:01 a.m. Saturday morning. 18 hours later, 12 massive ordnance penetrator bunker buster bombs dropped by 6 B-2 bombers on the main enrichment site in Fordow. A 7th B-2 bomber dropped 2 30,000-pound bombs on the underground uranium enrichment site at Natanz. Lastly, 30 Tomahawk missiles fired from an Ohio-class submarine 400 miles away landed at Isfahan. It is much too early to say what the bomb damage assessment at Isfahan, with its hardened tunnels some 600 feet deep, really were. Current and former Pentagon officials think the program was likely set back by 1 to 2 years, but no one knows where the highly enriched uranium actually is. 900 pounds of it, enough for 9 nuclear bombs. It could have been moved or could be buried, we're told. There is little doubt that the U.S. will now face a retaliatory strike from Iran. After the U.S. military killed General Qasem Soleimani in 2020, it took Iran 10 days to fire ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq, but this time it may come a lot sooner. Kayleigh?
Jen, quick question for you, because I'm reading reports about the airspace being closed above Al Udeid airbase there. Was there any effort to disperse troops ahead of this moment? Because 10,000 U.S. troops is a highly concentrated number of U.S. troops in one place.
We don't have any details, but I can assure you that troops and embassy personnel have been dispersed, and the family members of those troops and embassy members were sent home in the last week. Also, we can report that many of those, we had satellite imagery showing that many of the planes that were at Al Udeid, the U.S. warplanes, they had been moved. You couldn't see them on the tarmac last week. But still a very tempting target, symbolically and otherwise, for the Iranians, and certainly closing the airspace over Qatar. It's clear that other embassies, as well as the Qatar itself, has this same intelligence.
Thank you, Jennifer. You know, Harris, this has happened rapidly. We saw the UK make moves in the US, and now you can look at some of the satellite imagery and you do not see planes over Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, what really flagged me was the shelter in place. So that happened much earlier today. And then you saw the UK get involved in that as well, telling its citizens as well. And that's always a sign that if you didn't get out, and we've heard President Trump in the last few days saying, get on something flying. You know, if you're in that region, and particularly on the ground in Israel, anywhere near there. So many people have taken it up to, and then they've got land bridges going to some of our friends and allies, as well as much as we can lean on them at this point. I mean, Jordan put out a pretty interesting statement that didn't support us, but maybe they just say that publicly, we hope. But in this instance, what's key here is Iran has hit us so many times as military bases around the region. 200+ times in Biden's presidency, and he did nothing. So they think they've got a bird in the hand by hitting our military people. And as KT McFarland said, and as generals have said on this very air, they need to rethink that after Operation Midnight Hammer.
Yeah, and we know more than 600 troops killed in Iraq at the hands of Iran and their proxies. Brian, you know, the Biden presidency was mentioned, and I do want to put the action President Trump took in historical context. I want to take us back to the late 1990s and show you what Democratic presidents have promised and what President Trump actually did. You can see this here. Clinton, as all of you know, Iran needs to meet its energy needs, and then he goes on to say Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. Obama, I've stated Iran will never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Biden, we will not, let me say it again, not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. President Trump, the first president who was actually able to stand in front of a camera and say Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. The first three have one thing in common, words. The fourth one has an action.
Yeah, it's such a joke when you see Democrats go, you know, this is a war of choice. We'd have to do that. It's not a threat to us. This is Israel's problem. Since when is it Israel's problem? The other thing is, if they go ahead and hit us in Qatar, keep in mind, there's going to be an immediate response. It's going to be coming right away. We told them in no uncertain terms, if you hit us back, this is it. You hit us back, we're going to wipe out your oil, going to wipe out your gas. Try to get an economy going in Iran if you have neither one of those energy sources. Also, Israel has picked up the pace. They are bombing out paramilitary sites. Right. There are different places, government buildings in Tehran. They also have bombed out the front of Evin prison, where a lot of political prisoners are being held. So believe me, this is not going away. They have lost their command and control. Most of the nuclear scientists. They have an 86-year-old leader hanging out in a bunker somewhere. They should realize, if I could take the president's term, they got very few cards.
Yeah, they do. You know, you have the extraordinary actions of President Trump and the extraordinary actions of our military. Tudor, I want to play this for you. I want to take us back to 2013 to President Obama and the time he mentioned Fordo. Listen to this.
They don't need to have a underground fortified facility like Fordo in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They certainly don't need a heavy water reactor at Iraq in order to have a peaceful nuclear program. They don't need some of the advanced centrifuges that they currently possess in order to have a limited, peaceful nuclear program.
They didn't need that, but they built Fordo underground, and so it didn't appear that those words worked.
No, and I think that's what all rational military generals have come out and said. Like, we are watching what they're doing. We see that instead of having 3 to 5% uranium enrichment in Iran, they have 60%. We know what that means. That means they are going toward nuclear weapons. This is also a country that has said death to Israel, death to America, time and time again. Barack Obama knew it was dangerous. He wasn't willing to do anything about it because he was scared. Donald Trump has proven nothing. He is afraid of nothing, and he is willing to protect America over anything else.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Emily, I want to focus for a second, and I know you'll do just such a great job at this, on our military. The extraordinary work that they did, the second longest B-2 mission ever to be flown, second only to 9/11, refueling multiple times in air, a stealth mission with diversions. I mean, this shows how extraordinary the U.S. armed forces are, how elite, how incredible in every sense of the word.
I think it can never be overstated the intensity and the elite caliber of the collaboration and the constellation of perfection required to pull this operation off. And oftentimes when we see a main character who makes it look effortless, we think that they're operating solo. And the reality here is those beautiful B-2 bombers had a support squad, the superheroes of the century. And we heard about the third and fourth gen fighter pilots or fighter jets. So those are the F-22s, the F-35s. These are of history, and the support required, you know, keep in mind, of course, obviously, the B-2, its strength is in its stealth, but certainly not in its self-defense maneuverability, agility, or ability to withstand attacks midair. So that's what the squad is for. And when you introduce as well the submarine, right, that shot the Tomahawks over, and you introduce the precision required, of the timeliness, of the silence required, I mean, it's an extraordinary feat. And may I just say, as you referenced prior president's comments, the actions here of this president, in the words of the Wall Street Journal editorial board, who said that this president met the moment. I note Jamie Metzel, who was Biden's deputy staff director of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He served on the National Security Council under President Clinton. And he had a lengthy post on Saturday where he said, look, I believe electing Kamala Harris would have been better for our country, goes on. But he said, I also believe Vice President Harris would not have had the courage or fortitude to take such an essential step as the president took last night. That's a rational mind. He said, I am not beholden to tribalism. And that is someone that saw what this president and our military did as extraordinary.
Only Chuck Schumer and Amy Klobuchar and AOC could take some notes from him, and we will get to that later in the show.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.